Hi everyone, welcome to the BioEdge. And in this audio clip we're going to be investigating one of those bits of textbook wisdom that seems self-evidently correct and almost incontrovertible, which is that plants compete for light, and that because of this competition for light we have the phenomenon of forests. It makes sense at a superficial level, it seems to anyway. The seedlings germinate, there's light coming from above, and the faster they can get towards the light, the faster they can compete against each other, and so the saplings grow taller, and eventually you wind up with the tall vegetation we call forests. and so this whole textbook factoid has arisen, as it were, where we can explain vegetation structure in terms of competition for light. But the more you scrutinize this idea, the more it seems to break down, because if you think about it, if I was a seedling or a sapling trying to compete with the juvenile woody plants around me, the first thing I'd do to get a corner on the light, as it were, would be to grow sideways, not up. Because think about it, if you grow towards the light, you're not actually getting any more light. You're just slightly lessening the distance between yourself and the sun. Meantime, everyone around you is doing the same thing. And you're all wasting a lot of energy putting down wood in the form of your stems. But you're kind of running on the spot, as it were, because you're still getting the same amount of light. And the only way ever to really win that battle for light with the plants around you is to occlude their light, is to take their light away from them by shading them. And the quickest way to do that would be just to grow sideways. And so you can imagine doing a thought experiment about this. You can imagine a bunch of plants, if they were really competing for light, simply expanding sideways, even if it's a few inches above the ground, and shading each other out. And if that was the real battleground, vegetation would look very different from the forests that we see in many parts of the world. What we'd have is low thickets, or messes of creepers, or scandent plants, all moving sideways, trying to crowd each other out. And there would never really be any evolutionary driving force towards the kinds of tall forests that we see in redwood forests in California, or in the even taller mountain ash forests in Tasmania, which get higher than 100 meters. And so it's very difficult to see how, once you've reached, say, 20 meters high, you can explain the continued growth of a tree to 120 meters in the case of mountain ash, Eucalyptus regnans in Tasmania, Australia, in terms of light competition. Surely by 20 meters you would have pretty much done it all in terms of competing for light. And so if tree growth can't be explained in terms of light competition, in the case of trees that grow straight up towards the sky, like so many conifers and so many eucalypts, then what is the driving force behind the formation of forests? Well, Anthony Mills and I would theorize that what's really being competed for is not energy, but nutrients, critical nutrients that make all the difference between success and failure. And that the beauty of a tree as a tall, deep-rooted life form is that it can actually gather its own nutrient supply in a way that a low plant, such as a grass, cannot do. Now, when a tree digs its roots deep to bring enough water up to sustain its very rapid transpiration rate, it's also bringing up a whole bunch of nutrients that have leached down into the soil to a depth that no herbaceous plant is going to be able to reach. And similarly, a tall tree reaching up into the sky and creating a crown of leaves is doing more than merely photosynthesizing, gathering light, and competing for light. It's also gathering dust, because although the sky may look fairly transparent, there's actually a lot of nutritious dust floating around in most parts of the world. And if you can somehow trap this dust, perhaps with the aid of electrostatic phenomena on your foliage, you get a lot of supplementary nutrients that you wouldn't get if you were a low plant such as a grass. And so when you start looking at the forests of the world in terms of this new thought experiment, as it were, in which the woody plants are competing with each other not for light, but for resources such as leached nutrients and airborne nutrients in the form of aerosol, then you really start to see a a competitive currency, which can explain how being a 120-meter tree is better than being a 20-meter tree, and where having, say, 40-meter deep roots is better than having, say, 10-meter deep roots, because what you're trying to do is gain a competitive edge where you make up for some kind of shortfall in your environment in terms of nutrients by having a life form that actually gathers more and more of those nutrients the bigger you get. And in that sense, we have the beginning of a theory as to why various parts of the world are covered in treeless grasslands naturally, because in those kinds of environments, naturally treeless, grassy environments, it could be that the nutrient regime in the soil is already perfectly adequate for plants to grow in such a way that all the energy they photosynthesize is devoted to continual turnover and respiration. And there's nothing to be gained by growing taller or digging deeper, because you already have exactly the right ratio of nutrients in your environment for maximum plant activity. And so what we're suggesting here is moving away from this this idea of light competition, even though it's been so well established in textbooks, and moving into something slightly more testable in terms of a theory of vegetation height based on a currency of nutritional supplementation from both the deep sources to which nutrients have been leached deep in the ground into the groundwater, and the airborne nutrients in the form of aerosols, which can be gathered by tree crowns. Okay, looking forward to seeing you next time on Exploring the BioEdge.